I didn't win the volleyball championship. The girls won. Did a great job. But yeah, as John said, I get to come back here every 3 years and spend some time here. I spent 3 months here in New Hampshire, so it's been great being here these last 3 months and just kind of plugging back into church. And so thank you so much for welcoming me into your small groups and into your homes and families and for feeding me so much. So thank you very much for all of that. It's been great. Thanks for helping me feel well loved and supported so that I can now go back out and into ministry, re-energized and refreshed for ministry. So thank you very much for that. Now, if you want to hear a little bit more about what God's doing in Namibia, then you're going to have to catch me afterwards, or you can sign up for my monthly email list. This isn't going to be so much of a ministry presentation. We did that a couple weeks ago. This is going to be more of a missional sermon, okay? So let me start off with a story. When I was in high school, my senior year in high school, there were basketball tryouts, and they didn't quite have enough players to have both a varsity team and a JV team. And so they were doing like special recruiting to get some extra guys just so that they could have a JV team. And now I hadn't played basketball since middle school, so I wasn't very good, but I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I'll give it a try. So being a senior on the JV team certainly has its advantages. I was playing with all these freshmen and sophomores, and so you can imagine my rebound numbers that year were awesome. But being on the JV team, we weren't going anywhere. There wasn't any tournament at the end of the season. It was just for fun. So we were just playing for fun. But that season, our varsity team was actually really good. So they went into the playoffs as one of the top seeds. And so as soon as the last JV game, as soon as our JV season was over, the coach offered to us and said, that you guys, you can still come to practice with us to help give the varsity guys like a full team to practice against, and we would love to have you join us. And you can even come and sit on the bench in the playoff games and feel like, be there to support the team. So we'd basically be a part of the team, just practice players, like Rudy, So good film. Now, most of these younger guys, freshmen and sophomores, they had no interest in practicing if they weren't going to play. But to me, that sounded awesome. Like I could see that this team was something special, that they were really going places. And I was like, yes, that's something that I want to be a part of. So I joined them and I practiced with them. And these guys just kept winning. And so there I was with them, sitting on the end of the bench, rushing out on the court after the game when they won. And I was there. It was like part of the team. And that team went all the way to the state finals. Right, so there we are at the massive Plymouth State College gymnasium, hundreds of fans screaming and shouting for them. There I am sitting at the end of the bench watching the game. It was so exciting, something to be a part of. I got a chance to be a part of something that was so much bigger than just me. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever had that kind of an opportunity to be a part of something big? Something exciting, maybe a business opportunity, or maybe it's becoming a couple, maybe starting a family, something that was bigger than you, something that's exciting to be a part of. Have you ever thought about Christianity like that? Because that's actually Jesus' invitation to us when he says, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. He says, go and make disciples of all nations. He's calling us to come be part of the team, to get involved in something big that God has been doing since the very beginning. So what I want for us to do this morning is to unpack from the scriptures, what is God's big mission? What is it that he's been doing in the world? And then we're going to talk about how we can be a part of that, okay? So that's where we're going. Let's start back at the very beginning. Genesis chapter 1. God is introduced as the creator of the universe, right? The sovereign king over everything. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then what was the state of the earth at that point? There in verse 2, the earth was formless, or we could say that it was without form or structure. It was kind of chaotic, and it was void, or it was empty. And darkness was over the surface of the deep. So the earth was chaotic and empty and dark. And then what did God do? Well, throughout the rest of chapter 1, we see God forming the formlessness and filling the emptiness. And there in verse 3, he speaks light into existence. Let there be light. So light comes in and pushes back the darkness. This is God's mission from the very beginning. God's light pushing back the darkness. And so in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, then we get a beautiful picture of God's perfect kingdom of light there in the Garden of Eden. Everything is according to his design and plan. Perfect relationships between people, perfect relationship between God and mankind. That's how it was meant to be. But then, early on, there were some rebels who did not want to live under the rule and authority of the rightful king. Rebels like Satan, sin, and death. These big cosmic enemies of God. And so they set up their own kind of little rival kingdom of darkness, right? Like a rebel faction that's trying to have a coup and overthrow the government. They're trying to usurp God's authority. And in Genesis 3, they deceive mankind and kind of recruit them to join their kingdom of darkness. And so then darkness spread throughout the earth. So then fast forward to Genesis chapter 12, and God intervenes. He chooses one family, Abraham and his descendants, and God says, I will be your God. You will be my people. And so this is who becomes the Old Testament nation of Israel. So does that mean then that God gave up on everybody else? Now he's just going to focus on Israel? No, that's not the case. Right from the very beginning, God says to Abraham, through you, all families on the earth will be blessed. In verse 3, the next one after that. There you go. So God's purposes for Israel was to be like a little microcosm of his kingdom of light amidst all the darkness that was surrounding them, right? So God's relationship with Israel was going to show off to all those other nations who he is, who he was as Yahweh. He alone is the rightful and good king. Okay, think about their context for a second. Egypt, they had a god for everything. They had a sun god, a moon god, a god of the Nile, a god of bulls, frogs, everything had a god. Or Canaan, the land that they would eventually go into. They worshiped Baal or Asherah or Dagon or any other number of idols. But in the midst of all of these polytheistic cultures, there is Israel. And God says, Israel, you are to worship the one true God. Yahweh is to be your God. They were to be different than all the other peoples around them. And there would be a little beacon of light in the midst of all of that darkness. And then through Moses, God gave them a good law, right? And this was a law to govern their society in a way that was actually so far advanced beyond all the other laws of the surrounding nations. They were to be a society where justice ruled rather than vengeance, where they looked after the unprotected, like the poor, the foreigners, fatherless, and the widows. Their society, as they lived that way, they were such a contrast to all of those other nations that they would be like a little beacon of light amidst all of the darkness. And so this is exactly what we see throughout the Old Testament story, right? When the king of Israel followed after God and his law, and they led the nation based upon God's word, then they would fulfill that role as a light to the nations. They would be blessed and prosperous. So, for example, in their heyday, during the reigns of King David and King Solomon, we see exactly that. Like the Queen of Sheba, all the way down in Africa, heard about the greatness of Israel, and she's like, I got to go see for myself. So in First Kings chapter 10, verse 9, she proclaims, blessed be the Lord, that is Yahweh, your God, who has delighted in you and set you on the throne of Israel. Because Yahweh loved Israel forever, he has made you king that you may execute justice and righteousness. A little mini example of God's kingdom of light that was pushing back the darkness. But I think you may know the rest of the story, that darkness crept back in. Solomon and most of his successors ended up falling away from following God, and they led Israel to become actually just like all the other nations around them. And so eventually those decisions led to the consequences, and they were conquered and taken into exile. But Israel was never meant to be a perfect example because they were a nation of people, right? And people were corrupted by sin. They weren't going to be a perfect illustration or a perfect picture. Rather, they were pointing forward to the perfect king and the perfect kingdom of light. The Old Testament prophets, they prophesied about that king. Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, and on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. His kingdom is one of peace and justice and righteousness forever. Earlier in that very same passage, Isaiah chapter 9, verse 2, this is the very passage that Matthew quoted in the scripture reading that we had earlier. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in the land of deep darkness, on them a light has shone. Right? This promised coming king is the light breaking in to the darkness. And so then when Jesus finally shows up on the scene, Matthew chapter 4, Matthew says, look, this very prophecy is being fulfilled. Jesus is the rightful king. He's the son of David. He's not just the son of David, but he's the son of God, right? The light that has come down from heaven, that has entered into our messy brokenness, our darkness, and he comes as a light to push back the darkness. In John chapter 1, speaking of Jesus, John writes, in him was life, and life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. In John chapter 8, verse 12, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus is the light, pushing back the darkness. I'll just show you a few examples of this. In Jesus' public ministry, he starts going around healing people, casting out demons, healing their diseases, raising the dead. All of those kind of things are corruptions of the kingdom of darkness, right? That's not the way it's supposed to be. So then when Jesus is going around healing people and all of these miracles, he's actually showing us little glimpses of this is what the kingdom of light is like, right? It's pointing us forward to Revelation 21 and 22. When in the new creation, there's going to be no more sickness, no more tears, no more death. Or Jesus goes around and he's touching lepers, something that they wouldn't do in that day, right? But for him, it wasn't their uncleanness, like their ceremonial uncleanness that made him unclean, like it would have been in the Old Testament law. No, it was actually his cleanness that made them clean, right? The unclean becoming clean. It's a little picture of the kingdom of light. Or Jesus summarizes the law and he says, the kingdom citizen loves God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength, and they love their neighbor as themselves. And so every time that we set aside our pride and our selfishness, every time that we would put another's interests above ourselves, we're demonstrating a little glimpse of that kingdom of light. This is what it's like to be part of God's kingdom. So it's like Jesus is saying, hey, don't you guys remember back in Genesis 1 and 2, that perfect kingdom of light before all the sin and all the corruptions and all the darkness? That's That's me. I am the king. That's my kingdom. I am the king of that kingdom. Come, follow me. Join the kingdom of light. That's Jesus' invitation. It's the first part of his invitation. Follow me. Come, submit yourself to the true king. Transfer your allegiance from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light. Colossians chapter 1, verse 13 and 14. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. You see, we're all living in the kingdom of darkness. And under the kingdom of darkness, we're enslaved to sin. But that's actually it's not even really living. It's more like a living death, right? Like a zombie. Any of you zombie fans out there? You watch these shows and movies and stuff? Maybe you've seen some costumes around this weekend. That's what the kingdom of heaven is like. It's like, well, a zombie's kind of alive, but it's actually dead. It's a living death. It's actually bondage to things like unforgiveness, bitterness, pride and selfishness and materialism or alcoholism or sexual addiction or whatever it is. But Jesus, through his death and resurrection, like Kathy was just talking about, provided a way to be forgiven of those things, to be restored in a reconciled relationship with God, and to have a new life. He gives us a new heart that can love God and that can love people. And so he's offering, what he's offering us is real life. Not this living death, but real, eternal quality of life. A life that's filled with love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and faithfulness and goodness and gentleness and self-control. Doesn't that sound so much better? That's life. That's the real life. So leave your old slave master of sin and become a citizen of God's kingdom of light. That's the invitation. It's not just say this prayer so that you can have fire insurance when you die. Right? It's an invitation to life, to real, eternal quality of life. So come, be a part of his kingdom of light. If this church or Jesus thing is kind of new to you, then I would be remiss not to extend that invitation to you personally. Apart from Jesus, it's not life. It's a living death. It's enslaved to sin. It's stuck in darkness. But it doesn't have to be that way. Jesus is inviting you to come into the light, be part of his kingdom of light, not to be scolded or condemned, but to be graciously loved and forgiven. So come. But the invitation doesn't stop there. It's an invitation, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. It's an invitation to come and join him in this mission of bringing the light to others, helping to push back the darkness, right? What God's been doing since the very beginning. Now he's inviting us to come and be a part of it. A little later, Jesus told his followers, hey, you guys remember, I told you before that I am the light of the world. Well, now, Matthew chapter 5, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but you put it on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Or Paul wrote in Philippians chapter 2, do all things without grumbling and disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. You shine because you're different, because you're not like the darkness. You're not a zombie anymore. You're actually alive, regenerated with the life who is the light of men. Okay, so now this is not because we are a source of light. as if internally I am providing some kind of light, but rather like the moon reflects the light of the sun. We are reflecting the light of Jesus to those around us. So missions and evangelism, and this is the point here, right? If you take nothing else away, this is your point to take away. Missions and evangelism are participating with God in pushing back the darkness. That's the mission. Our unbelieving friends and family and coworkers and classmates and neighbors, they're like zombies. They're enslaved to sin and death, and they're living in the kingdom of darkness. Just look around. I probably don't even have to tell you, we live in a dark world. You know that full well. People are trapped in their darkness of injustice, broken families and domestic violence and family disputes and division and hatred and anger and anxiety and depression. And then that's not even to mention all the coping mechanisms that people go to try and escape from all of those things into social media or shopping or alcohol or drugs or pornography or self-harm or suicide. But it doesn't have to be this way. There is a better way, right? That's the good news that we carry. That's the gospel. So through your testimony, you are exhibit A, that with Jesus, transformation is possible. Through your conversations, you can invite people to find wholeness from their brokenness by pointing them to Jesus. Through your lifestyle, you are demonstrating that God's way, the kingdom of light, is actually better than a life enslaved to sin, right? Because you're cultivating the fruits of the Spirit, like we've been talking about in our latest sermon series. Your life and your attitude and your perspective are a shining example to the rest of the world, right? Of the kind of life that's possible through Jesus. We are now, Paul calls us his ambassadors, right? Just like Old Testament Israel was. We're like little beacons of light, shining out in the darkness. Now, I realize that dark places are hard to go into. Creepy things thrive in the dark. But that's why they so desperately need the light. This is a behind enemy lines rescue mission, right? We need to go into those dark places. So be bold, be courageous, be willing to go into the messiness of people's lives, just like Jesus did for us, to shine his light and his hope and forgiveness and love into that darkness. Doesn't that sound like an exciting mission to be a part of? This past New Year's, some friends of a friend were going to be hosting this massive New Year's Eve party, right? Live DJs, loud music, dancing, lots of booze, the kind of things they do. At the last minute, they needed some accommodation for these apparently big name artists that they were bringing up from South Africa. I never heard of them, not my scene. I had a few extra rooms at the place where I was staying, so I was like, sure, they can stay with me. That's fine. They were nice guys, very non-Christian, okay? So they invited me out to their party. I was very thankful. I already had plans. I'm going to go watch some fireworks. Thank you very much for the invitation. Sometime past 2 a.m., I went to sleep at 2 a.m. Sometime past that, they came home. They came back, and they do, as I imagine non-Christian celebrities probably do, they had invited some new friends back with them. So next morning, I'm sitting at the dining room table, having my breakfast and doing my devotions, and out of one of the rooms walks this girl. Eventually, she walks over, sits down next to me. Hi, what's your name? She introduces herself. I'm Mike, nice to meet you. So, what you doing? I'm reading my Bible. So I show her what I'm reading. You do this every day? Yeah, pretty much every day. I've never known anybody who actually takes it that seriously. So she tells me a little bit of her story and how she was wanting to get back into going to church. So I invite her to my church. She comes a few weeks later, then comes a second time, then she disappeared. Then not long ago, I actually got a text that says, hi, sorry, I fell off a bit, but I want to come back. I realize I need more Christians in my life. Do you happen to know a small group that I can be a part of? Baby steps, right? When your eyes get so accustomed to the dark, it takes a while to get adjusted to the light. But this is the mission. This is what God has been doing since the very beginning, entering into people's messiness and brokenness and rescuing them to come to the light. So then, the question for us today is, how are we getting involved? How are you participating with God in pushing back the darkness? So to answer that question, there are endless answers. The opportunities are as big and wide as your own creativity and imagination. But let me just give you a few suggestions that I see right off. Ultimately, what we're talking about here is that you are carrying the light with you wherever you go. Right? Nobody lights a lamp to hide it under a basket. Right? It's there to shine. You have the light, so you share it. So how do you share a flame from one candle to the next candle? Like we do the whole Silent Night thing at Christmas Eve? They got to touch each other, right? They got to be in such close proximity that they rub off on each other. So let me ask you, how well do you know your neighbors, your coworkers? How many non-Christian people do you know within your community? Oh, but Mike, I'm not really good with people. Well, Jesus didn't say go make disciples if you're an extrovert. Let me just encourage you, just start small. Start with one neighbor. Maybe pop by when you see them out raking their leaves or something and introduce yourself. And then remember their name. And when you see them again, greet them by name. That's where it starts. It's that easy. And then eventually you can ask about their life, their family, their hobbies, find a connection point. And you don't need to hide your beliefs or your church involvement or whatnot. You can be open about those things without being overbearing, right? But then they'll know. If I ever need to find God, I know who I need to talk to about that. I know somebody. Parents, you go out to all these different activities and programs for your kids, right? You rub shoulders with other parents as you're sitting at these events, you're sitting in the stands in their games. Don't just ignore each other like good New Englanders. Start a conversation. Get to know people. Invite the families of your kids' friends over for a grill out, And then when you're making a salad or you're grilling some meat, then listen to the junk that's going on in their lives and shine your light into their darkness. Show them how a relationship with Jesus can help heal that brokenheartedness. Students, take your light to your campuses, to your teachers, to your classmates, to the staff. You guys know full well, anxiety and depression are epidemic amongst your peers. So fight back against that. Show how a relationship with Jesus can give you peace in the midst of all those different stresses that they're dealing with. Families or couples, have you ever considered adoption? Being a parent to the parentless, giving a child a godly Christian home to grow up in. Empty nesters, maybe you have some extra rooms now that you can offer a home to the homeless. Retirees, find some younger people. It's time to download all that life wisdom that you've been accumulating over the years. Whatever it is that your situation in life, think creatively. How can I use this to be a part of God's big mission? A few more thoughts. You can volunteer at a local charity. Right? We just mentioned Share. That's a great place to go, helping to kind of push back the darkness in some really practical ways. I used to help out over at the Upper Room Compassionate Ministries in Nashua. I'm not sure that's still there anymore. I would just go in and I'd ask, hey, how do you guys need me to help out today? Sometimes it was just like sorting clothes. Sometimes it was, hey, when somebody grabs a cup of coffee, can you just sit with them and listen to their story and just be an encouragement to them? Some of you know Larry's daughter, Leia. I love this. When she was in high school, like 15, 16 years old, she would go to this ministry in Manchester at like 5 a.m. on a Sunday morning, like what teenager does that, and help cook breakfast for the homeless people there. And then she would still come to church after, right? You can help advocate with Marissa Fernandez, who's fighting against human trafficking. Go help Rick and Vicky, helping people battle against sexual addiction, right? All these kind of places, they would love to have volunteers. They always need help, right? So where can you get involved? Find some kind of cause or something that you're passionate and excited about, and then go and help push back the darkness. Another super cool opportunity that I see right now, you don't even have to leave New Hampshire to reach all nations, because all nations are coming to us. Right? I was just in the thrift store the other day. I met a few ladies from the Congo. Right? Almost every time I go into the Walmart down here, I hear accents from other places in the world. Right? Manchester and Concord are actually some of the hubs where immigrants and refugees come and live. Did you know that? Now, I'm not here to talk about the politics of immigration, right? But I'm here to tell you that there are lost people from unreached places that are coming to your doorstep. Imagine if the first person that they meet when they get here is a Christian who's here to welcome them and help them get accustomed to this strange new culture. What an opportunity. Or you could go on a short-term mission trip. I know I think it was last year, there was a bunch of families that got together, went down to West Virginia and did some practical ministry in a community down there. Some of you know Ava Stein. She came with my mission organization, SIM, on a trip over to South Africa. I was talking with Adrian Fernandez. You know, he was telling me about the different mission trips he's been doing as a teenager. I think there's a cross-cultural learning experience coming up through Grace Chapel to go to Guatemala. You know, I'll invite you. Come, bring your family over to Namibia. Richard Johnson, he came over, brought a couple of his grandkids. He did some marriage seminars, and they went into the public schools and hung out with some kids. It was great. Go on a short-term mission trip. And then also, as you are going, let me encourage you to get involved by sending. That is, helping to support those full-time missionaries and workers who are going out to some of these hard-to-reach places. Those people are usually not going to paying jobs. For example, John mentioned I'm serving at the Bible College there in Namibia. Now, they don't pay me. They can't afford to pay me, so I raise funds here to support me to serve over there. Right? I couldn't be there without generous financial partners like this church, like many individuals in this church. So thank you very much for participating with me and helping send me out. So you can support a missionary financially. You can sign up for their newsletters, figure out how you can be praying for them. Take a prayer card, stick it on your fridge or put it on your dining room table so when you eat a meal, then you pray for them. And then drop them an encouraging email that says, hey, we prayed for you today. Now, as I was preparing for this message, I realized that when I share about missions, I've made an assumption that's actually causes me to stop there, like with that sending application. The assumption that I've made is that none of you will actually want to become long-term foreign missionaries. So I need to kind of repent of that assumption. And today I want to actually invite you, give you the full invitation. Could it be that some of you would be those people or families who would help take the light of the gospel to some of the hardest to reach places in the world? Oh, but Mike, I don't feel called to that. That's okay. I never heard a voice from God. I never got some mystical sense of calling. My calling was kind of like Mark in 2 Timothy 3, verse 11, because I would be useful in the ministry. And as one of my friends used to say, you're actually already called. Matthew 28, the Great Commission, right? Now it's just a matter of where and when. Oh, but Mike, I'm not a pastor or a theologian. I wouldn't be very useful. Well, I guarantee you that any and every skill set can be used in God's mission. We need people in admin, in finance, in HR, and in IT, and in content creation, and medicine, and teachers, engineers, farmers, mechanics, you name it. We can find a place to use your gifts and skills and passions in the mission. Oh, but other parts of the world, that seems so foreign and so weird. It sounds like a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there, that line. Everything is new the first time you do it, right? But you can grow into it. With an openness, with a learning attitude, with a love for people, I bet even you can be fairly adaptable. Living in another culture has really actually grown me incredibly, right? It's forced me to drop a lot of stereotypes. It's helped me to learn to see people for who they are, to understand people better, and then that helps me to better love people. Now, I don't love every single thing about living in Namibia, but I love a lot of things. I've learned to love a lot of things. And that's going to be true about anywhere that you live, right? Oh, but Mike, my mission is to my family right now. I have to focus on raising my own kids. Absolutely, right? I'm a youth guy, so we'll be the first to tell you the importance of discipling your own kids. Absolutely. But consider this. The kind of Christianity that you are practicing is the kind of Christianity that you are passing on. What better way to teach your kids to be compassionate and missional than to actually be doing missions together with them? And that's not even to mention that kids are actually one of the greatest connection points across all cultures, right? Either they're out making friends and then introducing those parents to you, or parents or people are asking you about your kids, right? That's such a great bridge to start connections and conversations. Oh, but Mike, there's so many risks and dangers out on the mission field, right? I've heard of missionaries and their life-threatening diseases and getting kidnapped or killed. What would that mean for my family? Well, you take risks every day, don't you? You risked getting in a car accident just driving to church this morning, but you had a purpose behind assuming that risk. Right? And then the greater importance or value of your purpose than the larger risk that you're willing to assume. But isn't this mission that we've been talking about of the utmost importance and value? And then isn't that worth taking the risk to fulfill the mission? Now, that doesn't mean that we're reckless. No. In my mission agency, we talk about minimizing unnecessary risk and mitigating necessary risks, because going to some of these hardest to reach places actually requires us to step out and take risks. And so we count the cost, we take the precautions necessary, but we step out in boldness and faith because lives are at stake. Okay, look, you don't need all of the answers up front, right? I can help you answer some of your objections, but really, you just need to take one step at a time. Whatever it is that you excel at today, there was a time before when you didn't, right? You had to take the first step, and then the rest came through time and experience and practice. You don't have to make a lifelong commitment. I didn't know that I was going to be there for 12 years when I first signed up. You just take the next step that God puts in front of you. See where that leads. So there I give you a whole bunch of suggestions, but as I said, the opportunities are as endless as your own creativity and imagination. But I want to invite you this week, or even this afternoon, to sit down and pray. Ask God, where is it that He would have you to get involved in a new way or in an increased way, to participate with Him in pushing back the darkness. When I was in high school, it was time to start thinking about college and careers. At the time, my default probably would have been to follow my dad into the software industry. Probably could have made some money doing that. But around that time, I heard a story from back in 1983 about a guy who was starting up a little computer company out of his garage. Maybe you've heard of it. His name was Steve Jobs. The company was Apple. And he was looking for a CEO to run the company, basically. And so he went to recruit a guy named John Scully, who was at the time the vice president for PepsiCo. Right? He was going to try and get him to leave this multi-million-dollar business to come and help with his computer startup out of his garage. And he did. And so later when they asked him why, what was it that was so convincing that led you to leave PepsiCo and join Apple, Scully said that Steve Jobs asked him this question. This was his pitch. Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world? That question really resonated with me, not to go get a job for Apple, but because I realized that for me, that sugar water was the computer industry, right? Technology changes so fast, any kind of program or app or whatever I would have designed, it would be obsolete probably by tomorrow, right? I wanted my life to make a difference for eternity. So I decided to forego the software degree and go to Bible college, become a youth pastor, and now a missionary. Now, for me, that was a career choice, but I already told you that God uses people in every career field, that he uses those people to take his light into those places. But what we're talking about here is the mission and the purpose that drives and directs your life. God is inviting you to participate in what he's been doing since the very beginning. Light, pushing back the darkness. Will you come be a part of it? Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Do you want to come with Jesus, change the world? Let me pray for us.